Picture this. You're a Roman soldier somewhere on the Rhine frontier, around 260 AD. You spent the last decade fighting off Germanic raids. Your boots are worn through. Your rations have been cut twice this year. And when your pay finally arrives, silver coins stamped with the emperor's face, you notice something. They look thinner than last year's. Less silver, more copper showing through the edges when you hold them up to the light. You're not imagining it. The empire isn't paying you anymore. It's paying you with a promise that everyone already knows is running out. I'm Copperfox, and trust me, this one's going to feel familiar. Let's get into the details. Last time we talked about the day Richard Nixon closed the gold window, the moment the US dollar was cut loose from anything real. But Nixon wasn't the first ruler to try this. 2,000 years earlier, the Roman Empire hit the exact same wall, and the emperor who tried to paper over it didn't just devalue Roman money, it helped destroy him. To understand how we got there, you have to go back to when the Roman denarius was, by any standard, solid money. Around the 1st century AD, the coin was roughly 90% silver. Merchants in Egypt, traders in Syria, soldiers on the Rhine, all of them accepted it without question. That trust was the foundation of the entire Roman economy. You could take a Roman coin anywhere in the known world and spend it. That's not nothing. That's centuries of credibility built into a small piece of metal. But credibility, as we discussed last time, only holds as long as the people behind it can be believed. Rome had an expensive problem. Actually, it had several. A standing army of nearly 500,000 soldiers spread across thousands of miles of border, an expanding bureaucracy, ambitious construction projects, wars on multiple fronts, Germanic tribes pushing through the Rhine, Sassanid Persians pressing from the east, revolts in the provinces. The Roman treasury, like all treasuries under pressure, struggled to keep up with the bill. The solution that kept being reached for was the same one Nixon would reach for 17 centuries later: stretch the money further. The denarius began to shrink in silver content, slowly at first, then faster. Under Nero, in the 60s AD, the silver content dropped from around 93% to roughly 90%. A small change, almost invisible, but it set a precedent that no emperor after him would reverse. By the time Septimius Severus came to power in 193 AD, the denarius was down to around 50% silver. His dying words to his sons, and historians actually recorded these, were essentially, "Pay the soldiers well and ignore everyone else." He knew what was keeping him on the throne, and he knew what it cost. His son Caracalla took this further. He introduced a new coin called the antoninianus, officially worth 2 denarii but only containing about 1.5 denarii worth of silver. A built-in discount, stamped with the imperial face and sent out as though nothing unusual had happened. By the 250s AD, the Roman Empire was in freefall. More than 20 emperors came and went in 50 years, most of them not through peaceful succession, but through assassination, military coup, or battlefield defeat. The man on the throne in 253 AD was Valerian. When Persian forces captured him in battle, the first Roman emperor ever taken prisoner by a foreign enemy, his son Gallienus inherited both the throne and the catastrophe. I was at a market in Rome once, sometime around 260 AD, watching a merchant hold a coin up to the light and then set it back down, not because it was foreign money, because he could see copper coming through the silver wash. When merchants start refusing the emperor's coins, something fundamental has already broken. Gallienus faced a version of the problem every emperor before him had made slightly worse. The military needed to be paid, constantly, reliably, or they would find someone else to pay them. The frontier was collapsing on multiple sides simultaneously, and the treasury did not have the silver to meet the demand. His solution was the same playbook, accelerated. The antoninianus coin, which was already down to around 50% silver when Gallienus took power, was reduced under his reign to somewhere between 2 and 5% silver. The rest was copper with a thin silver wash on the surface. The coins caught the light and looked right until you scratched them. The effect was immediate and predictable. More coins entered circulation. Prices began to rise. We actually have papyrus records from Roman Egypt tracking grain prices across this period. A unit of wheat that cost 1 denarius in 200 AD cost roughly 9 denarii by 300 AD. In a single century, the price of bread multiplied 9 times. Soldiers were still being paid in the same number of coins, but those coins bought less and less every year. The obvious solution was to pay them more coins, which required making more coins, which required more debasement, which caused more inflation, which required more pay. The spiral fed itself. The empire began to break apart under the pressure. Regional commanders controlling local armies stopped forwarding revenue to Rome and started declaring themselves emperors. At one point during Gallienus's reign, there were more than a dozen men across the empire simultaneously claiming imperial authority. Historians call the whole period the crisis of the 3rd century. For the people living through it, it had no name. It was just life getting steadily harder in ways nobody could quite explain. Gallienus himself was not a weak ruler. He reorganized the Roman cavalry, adapted his tactics to the new threats, and held the core of the empire together through 15 years of nearly continuous warfare. But military ability couldn't fix a monetary problem. When the money has lost its credibility, everything built on top of it becomes unstable. In 268 AD, Gallienus was assassinated, not by an enemy from outside, but by his own officers during a military campaign. The details of the conspiracy are murky, as Roman palace politics always are. But the pattern is not. Emperor after emperor in the 3rd century fell when they could no longer pay their armies reliably, when the troops who had elevated them found a better offer, when the economic chaos they presided over became reason enough for someone else to promise a fix. The debasement didn't kill Gallienus directly. It created the conditions, the instability, the distrust, the constant pressure to do more with less, in which removing emperors became almost routine. Here's what matters beyond the history lesson. Nixon closed the gold window in 1971. Gallienus shaved the silver from his coins in the 200s and 60s. The mechanisms are different. The logic is identical. When a government cannot meet its obligations through genuine revenue, it reaches into the money supply. When it inflates that supply, the value of each unit falls. When value falls, prices rise. When prices rise faster than wages, the people carrying the weight, soldiers, workers, merchants, anyone living on a fixed income, feel it first. And when enough of those people stop believing in the currency, they start to stop believing in everything behind it. Rome didn't fall because of inflation alone, but inflation was the crack in the foundation that let everything else come through. A government that can't keep its financial promises eventually can't keep any of its other promises either. And the people who discover that gap first are always the ones being paid to protect it. Next Wednesday, we're going to follow a completely different kind of empire. Not built on armies or emperors, but on shareholders, trade routes, and the world's first joint stock corporation. A private company that, at its peak, controlled roughly half of all global trade, maintained its own army, its own navy, and its own legal authority to declare war. How a group of merchants became a government, and what happened when it ran out of money, is a story that changes how you think about every corporation that's ever existed. That's the company that owned half the world, and I promise you won't see the ending coming.